Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Weighing In, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. Joined by my good friend, Grant Turner. Grant, the train decided that he could not run today without Mark Ostrander, so he is on assignment doing like adult things. Meanwhile, you and I get to talk about wrestling. We have been texting pretty much nonstop since Friday or Saturday. So let me first start by giving you and Mark your flowers. We both, all three of us, and we didn't know we were doing it, but we all entered the contest on fantasygrade.com for the Big Tens and Big 12s. In the Big Tens, the winning score was 144.5 points. You were at 140.5, which was good for fourth. I was fifth with 137, and Mark was eighth with 136. Then in the Big 12, the winning score was 148.5. Mark had 145, which was second, and you were sixth with 126.5, and I was ninth with 123. So I would probably owe you 2 plates of wings. However, we made side bets. I predicted the top 7 seeds at 165 in order, and you tried to predict the top 8 seeds at 184 in order, and I won both of those bets. But anyway, How are Big 12s, man?
Well, I haven't got to go to the Big 12 championships in a very long time because it's the same weekend as the NAIA championships, or has been for
forever.
I don't know, probably like 16 years.
Yes.
So I was able to take my dad and made it a little bit of a like family/business trip. The old timers from Northern Iowa choose to do their reunion at the Big 12 championships because it's a little bit more accessible for a lot of those guys. So they always bring 20 or 30 guys from their eras to go to the Big 12s instead of maybe the NCAAs every year. Just because it's like less people and, they get to see all 10 of their wrestlers rather than whoever qualifies to NCAAs, because it's very difficult to qualify all 10. So it was a lot of fun. Tulsa does a really good job with it, as many people know from the NCAA championships last year. And, the Big 12s have always kind of been there. So they got their spots where they want to go in between sessions. The hotels are within walking distance of most of them anyways. So it was a really, really good, well put on conference championship.
Yeah. As you know, I've done commentary for there for several years. It's an interesting setup because I think it's the only conference tournament that's at the same place every year. Like all the other ones rotate, and it's also not on a college campus. It's in a city. So those two things make it fun. And you and me are obviously familiar with Tulsa from junior duels as well. We could talk about your late night piano playing skills if we want to go there, if we want to do that.
For sure.
So anyway, so let's talk a little bit about the conferences. We'll just hit on a few things. First of all, shout out Pac-12. Arizona State feels like they finally got their team together. And I don't mean that in a critical way. Like they just finally got everybody healthy. Figs wins, Vasquez wins, Parco wins, Teamer wins, Schultz wins. So they win the Pac-12 and have, had a bunch of champs, which obviously helped in seeding, which we're going to get to because you have zero complaints about any of the seeds. So that'll be an easy conversation to have. And my boy was hot last night. And we need to give a shout out to Little Rock. They took second, which, that program's on the rise. And, they have at least one guy ranked or seated in the top 8. And, that's, now it's all about draws and pass to the semis and pass to the blood round and things like that. ACC, North Carolina State wins again. Big win for them at 49. Arrington beats Caleb Henson, which, puts him at the 3 instead of the 4 seed, which we'll at least talk about today. You talked about Big 12s. Iowa State wins it. Oklahoma State second, South Dakota State third, Missouri fourth. I don't think Iowa State beating Oklahoma State is as big a surprise as Missouri taking fourth. And they won a conference title, it feels like forever, for sure, when they were in the MAC. And then they won the Big 12s the last couple of years. I was the only person down there actually picking Missouri for several years, shockingly. People weren't picking Oklahoma State. There are a couple matches that stuck out to me, GT, at the Big 12s. The three matches that stuck out to me were the finals, 57, 84, 285. And I'll just kind of briefly touch on it. 57, I think the coaches got lost in the overtimes on what to pick, because there was a time where Chittum, if he just picks neutral, he wins. There's another time he picked top, and the only way he could win there was to ride out. He should have picked down and got cautioned. And the crazy thing is, Ryder Downey and Chittum are several spots away in the brackets, based on one 9 overtime match. 84, Parker Keckheisen just clearly, I think we're sleeping on how good of a year he's having, GT. Like, because he's not at a super high profile school, like, he may be having the best season in America. And if not, it's probably one of the best 5, like, for sure. And then heavyweight Bastida, I think I've told you guys privately, ever since CKLV, I thought he could win nationals. He's an international wrestler, so they go, this better than I do. We were joking how I'm the international guy now, but we were joking the other day, like, they might make weight 6 times a year. Then he went from that to having make weight 14, 15 times in 4 months. Now he doesn't have to make weight ever. And so you can see that in his performance. He's not getting tired. He's got some unbelievable takedown in the air, leg in the air takedown defense. And he clearly doesn't want to be underneath Hendrickson and probably not Kirkfleet. But my goodness, he's good on his feet. So your thoughts on any of those matches or anything else from the takeaways from the Big 12s?
Well, I think, you did a really good job of, like, categorizing, Parker Keckheisen. I think he's an Aaron Brooks away from being, like, a very, like, multiple time champion.
Yes. Yeah.
And I have been a humongous fan of Plot for a really long time. Mm-hmm. And I think Plot is, extremely journeyman. I think he's having one of the better years he's had in a while as well. But Parker really just looked extremely talented against Plot, and it was like 1 versus 2.
Yeah.
And I think that there was just another gear that Keckheisen could get to his legs and being able to do all that. I think, to be honest, I think that the Big 12 has had, if not this year for sure, with even, Fick sticking around, Keckheisen, Plot, Hendrickson, Bastida, Tanner Sloan, Rocky Elam. Like, there's a lot of top end talent in the Big 12 this year. I was very impressed with the highest level of those finals matches. And even in like the semis and quarters, like there's some really tough matches. And I believe that all of the conferences have very, very, very good high end talent, especially for the ACCs. Got to give flowers to those guys. They have some very talented guys. I'm happy that the large bids went the way that they did for some of those athletes that were in tough brackets.
Yeah.
But, I think probably one of my biggest takeaways was, I think probably the biggest takeaway was how much cleaner Keegan O'Toole's match against Carr went.
That's the last thing I was going to ask you about. Yeah.
It, absolutely, Keegan O'Toole is a humongous problem. Like, that guy is positional awareness, his counter offense, his ability to ride, his ability to create scrambles or cause you to like pause in a scramble. Humongous fan.
Keegan O'Toole does a lot of things extremely well, and a lot of the things that he does well, you can't teach average wrestlers right away. Like you just got to get better before you can do the things he does. But there's one thing that he does that you can teach right away that screws people up so much. And I'm going to get a little technique nerdy here, but like if most wrestlers are right leg lead, so they do a sweep to the right side, they do a head outside or a high crotch, whatever you want to call it, even double leg head, to the left side. What he does, and I think all of us have coached that have taught it in some way or another, but it's a big point of emphasis with him. Especially he doesn't have to do it against everybody, but he does it with Carr. When Carr hits his sweep, he bumps Carr's head to the outside. And so now you're like, if you're for the people watching, like you're here, now you got to change your grip. You got to learn how to finish with your left shoulder in the pocket instead of your right shoulder in the pocket. If you're a crackdown guy, all the finishes are opposite side now. And most guys are not great, equally great on both sides of the body. Like I was way better defending my right leg than my left leg. Like I was way better with a high crotch on one side and a head inside on the other. And if you make me switch, now you're thinking instead of wrestling in those positions. And when you're thinking instead of wrestling, you're probably losing because the other guy's wrestling. So it's just super complex. We'll definitely get to 65 because the brackets, you and I were texting and you said something. I think I'm blessed. Like somebody new was talking to me about our podcast and like, it seems like you guys are good at acting like you're friends and they didn't know anything. I'm like, we are friends. Like when we go to the other cities, we try to see each other. Like we try to hang out even when we talk every week. So it was all the banter is super friendly, but it is interesting how that one weight class, like there were so many common opponents and there wasn't a ton of inconsistency. Like we're 125, there's all kinds of commons, but people have won and lost versus everybody. So it's kind of chaotic. Okay. Big Tens. I think the lead story there was Scarachi weighed in, didn't wrestle. That affected seeds dramatically. There's two sides of the argument there. Hey, you get whatever you deserve. If you're not healthy at districts, regionals, conferences, whatever you want to call it in high school, or then you don't get to wrestle at the state tournament. That's a fact. We've all seen guys get injured, whatever, not be 100% healthy, but it certainly screwed up the bracket. And the other argument is, Soriano was ranked one year and seeded and then didn't even wrestle in the tournament. The stories that stuck out to me there, Aaron Brooks going for his fourth and just how dominant he looks. Like I was at the match live. So were you, the Brooks Glazer match. And I think he just did what he needed to win that because that duel was in hand. And that's sort of too like the Keck-Heisen Ply match. Keck-Heisen, I guarantee you, if we could hook him up to a lie detector, was sick that weekend. He was in Stillwater because he was like Jim Browning it every time. He was just getting up like super slow. And that guy's got a gas tank. And you saw the gas tank Saturday night or Sunday night, in the finals. Like whole different dude. I think the Mess and Brink committee match was a classic. By the way, I set the point, the over under 19.5, and it went over. So, that was awesome. If you like points, that was really fun. I think Levi Haynes low key is having he had a couple close matches during the middle of the season, but man, does he look dominant now. Jesse Mendez looked really good. He had to go through the hard side of the bracket. Bartlett was the 1 seed deservedly, but he had to beat Woods and Bartlett, and those matches were not big scores, but they were not close. Okay. 33, Shawver, Tech falling Ragusan, shocking. Teskey being the 14 seed, man, that screwed up a lot of things. Buzaka's essentially got Teskey's spot in the wild card situation. And then 125, Braden Davis goes from being, I think, the 6th seed there to the number 1 seed in the Nationals. Like that, I don't know if that's ever happened. Maybe we ask Kyle Klingman or Jason Bryant if a guy's ever been the 6th seed in the conference tournament and then the 1 seed at the NCAAs literally 5 days later. Can you think of anything like that?
I mean, I can't think of anybody that weight class is just volatile. So like this would be the year like this, something weird like that could happen.
Yeah.
But I can't think of anybody that all of a sudden they just go and they just do that. They're like, they make a run. They basically, like previously was ranked number 1 in the nation, I think, or number 2. So it's like, all right, well then everybody switches positions. But yeah, that weight class has just been bananas all year. It has stayed that way.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, hold on to your hats. Like the NCAA tournament is gonna be wild again.
Well, Davis, had 2 losses on paper, and then a lot of people felt like he lost the Ohio State duel, that crazy scramble. And a lot of people felt like he lost the Rutgers duel when they didn't have replay. And so, he only had 2 losses on his record. But you felt, not you, right. Some of the public felt like there were 4, and those are Big Ten losses, and one of them's to a backup. And the starter is the 8 seed or 9 seed, not like, okay, well, it's the backup to Matt Ramos or something. It's like Aaron Brooks is backup or something like that, So that way it was bonkers. What were your thoughts on the storylines? And I guess the other thing I'll say is this. Penn State, it's almost crazy. Like, it's just like Penn State next topic. Like, they killed everybody without Starachi. I mean, like, they 9 on 10, and it was a wrap. So thoughts, Big Ten.
Well, I think in general, I think that it was very competitive. Big Ten, I think, all of the allocations that they were awarded. So like everything was going down to like, who's going to get 9th? Like, are we going to have like a special wrestle off for
they
the
have
9th?
To do that. They do that. Yeah.
Right. So like, you're invested into the entire bracket when that happens.
Right.
Like, you're not just like going all the way to the finals and it's like, oh, we're going to see, this guy and this guy wrestle. Like, you're like, oh my God, who got 8th? Is he going to go? Is, who won in the Conci semis? I think more people were invested because of all of the basically, getting to the dance type situation. So I think as you look at kind of, and I'm going to pull it up here just to be, I want to make sure that I'm saying this correctly. 1 second. I'm going to pull this up here.
Well, you go ahead and interrupt me when you got what you pulled up. I thought one of the other interesting storylines was Michigan. Like, they had a really good semifinal round, backside Conci semi-round, and then they did not have a good last round. DiAugustino finishes on an even number, Ragusan even number, Gomez. I would say this: Gomez lost, but he closed the gap. Okay, so I mean that's the thing. Will Lewan obviously lost to Levi Haynes. Griffith didn't wrestle. So I mean, I don't know if they won them. I can't remember now if Lemley won his last round or Davison won his last round or Bullock won his last round. But I mean, you don't want to finish on even numbers. Like, I mean, like, it's just whatever. You want to finish 1, 3, 5, 7, not 2, 4, 6, 8. So did you find what you were looking for?
Yeah. So I wanted to kind of preface that, we had talked about kind of in that team score, how we're talking about, like, there was different, like, you could see, like, Penn State and then basically everybody else. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, if you look at the team score between Michigan, Nebraska, and Iowa, you're basically about, 10-point difference between those, it's 110 to 123-ish.
Yeah.
And then basically that next group, Ohio State, Rutgers, Minnesota, it's a right around, maybe like a 15-point. And you could definitely see how you were getting to these tiered shelves of like 9, and we didn't win, Strachey didn't wrestle. And it's like, we all kind of probably agreed, and Mark will probably agree wholeheartedly a little bit more, is that Iowa didn't have a really good showing to what they could have done, with Woods, Franek, Kelly, and but they all did what they had to be able to do in order to qualify. But you can see how that tier of teams score in those conference tournaments really played out. So you can see that, hey, the Pac-12 was very even heat at the very top, right? Everything was 100 to 120.
The Pac-12's got this goofy scoring system, though, where they place all 6, all 6 guys score points, and it's a 6-team tournament. So, the difference between it's 12, 10, 9. So the difference between first and third is 3 points. So if you win 2 or 3, let's say you get a bye and then 2 decisions, and I get a pigtail and pin and then lose and pin 2 guys in the back, I outscore you. And that cannot happen in a shallow tournament. They're doing that tournament. I don't know why. I think that somehow the people that don't think they're going to win the tournament have more votes. And it doesn't matter next year because Arizona State will be out of there. But if they scored that tournament 10-7, 4-2, and then nothing for 5th and 6th, which you should not get points for 5th and 6th in a 6-team tournament, how the final results would be, there'd be more disparity, which is frankly what you want to see.
Yeah, and I think that's lends itself to the conversation of what would they really do in a the big boy tournament, right? So when we get to the NCAAs and all of a sudden we're talking about hey, whoever gets to, and once again, I think that we all agree that Penn State is a very clear-cut favorite to win the national title as a team, based off of the regular season. But hey, who's going to make it above 100 points? And then what are those people going to look like? And who's going to have the tournament? Because we had talked about this on previous pods, is that you could see, I'll use an example of Iowa State. They could have 7 All-Americans. They could have 3. I think that that's the story for a lot of the teams that are in that world, where it's Ohio State could have 7. They could have 4.
Oklahoma State feels like they have 2 to 6.
Right. And it just depends on, I think that that's what's going to be really fun to watch as the team score develops for in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, the top 10 really, if you want to play that game. But it's how do you make that that blood round or the quarters pumping guys into the semifinals, or how are they going to work out with where they're at in the brackets, which we'll get into, and why I was so aggressively heated last night. And I was I haven't been that upset about something wrestling related in quite a while.
Yeah. I think we should give a shout out to Teskey. And the other thing is this, Tom Brands is really smart. It seems it's so weird that he, quote, made an error, put in Shriver, waited too long, put Teskey in. I understand people are well, just, reseat it with Teskey where he should be. And I get in an isolated incident, that's the right thing to do. But I also get, if you don't have a rule, then nobody submits anybody to the last minute, and then you have complete chaos. So, and they're trying to market the sport, and having pre-seeds and brackets and stuff like that helps. The other thing is this, which is kind of a bad news thing, but Iowa almost didn't have a finalist, and they said that would have been since 1970 something or 60 something. So that's crazy. And they don't have anybody seeded to make the finals this year. And again, Jason Bryant, Kyle Klingman, that article will go up, hey, when's the last time Iowa didn't have a finalist? They have guys that can make the finals, but they only have 2 guys seated in the top 4, and that's 125 and 141. So there's a lot there to sort of unpack, for lack of a better phrase. All right, let's go to, you want to go to individual brackets first, and then we can talk about, because I know Mark will want to talk about team stuff next week for sure. We want to talk about all this, but all right, let me share this tab here. Okay. So there's all different versions of the brackets. Flow has them, Track has them, probably 19 people have them. But what people are looking at, if you're watching this, this is the traditional one that was in the program. If you're old school and still buy the program at the tournament, this is the updated one that gets refilled every time. And this is just on NCAA.com. So you want to start at 25 or you want to work backwards and start at heavyweight in case we run out of time, GT?
It's fair.
So let's do that. We can start wherever we want. It's our podcast. All right. So here's heavyweight. For people that haven't seen these yet, I'm just going to name like the top 8 seeds or otherwise. So Kirkley, it's the 1. If the seeds hold, he'd wrestle the winner of Feldman Trefan, who's the 9-8. Nathan Taylor's the 5. Doucette is the 12. Slavikowski's the 13. Colton Schultz is the 4. Wyatt Hendrickson's the 3. McDermott's the 14. Heinzelman 11. Zach Elam 6. Gadiali from Campbell's the 7. Lucas Davison is the 10. Fernandez is the 15. Younger Brastida is the 2. I'll tell you my quick reactions looking at this last night and then flip it over to you. Number 1, I think Younger Brastida can win the tournament. Having said that, I also think Hendrickson could beat him in a rematch, and you get a feel there. And it's like most of these matches, one guy won 2 scrambles, and that's the difference in the match. The second thing that really surprised me, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but it really surprised me that the Big Ten runner-up was only the 9 seed at this weight. So I don't know what your thoughts on what I said or anything else about this bracket. And we're no picks today. We'll get into picks next week.
Yeah, for sure. I think also there's a multiple time, like you're going to see this at all other weight classes where the Big Ten runner-up is either like the 8 or the 9 against the other guy that's the Big Ten champ. And it's like they just separated them out to put them into the quarters. I think it's Levi Haynes and like Will Luan at 57, I believe, is another one where it's like those guys were in the Big Ten finals together, and they're going to meet in the, on the front side quarterfinal in that one little area. I think that there's, for the heavyweights, I think that they've done a very good job of fanning out the talent here. Kirkfleet, Bastida, Hendrickson, Schultz, Nathan Taylor, Zach Elam. I think that's, like pretty good separation there, where you're not necessarily having anything too crazy happen. And, I think that they kind of nailed that a little bit.
I know you were hot, but this is not one of the weight classes you were hot about, correct?
No. I think that for this weight class, I think it played out the way that we kind of all thought it might. With, kind of how whoever we thought would win between Hendrickson and Bastida would be the 2, and then whoever would lose between that would be the 3. I think everybody kind of saw that coming. And then of course, like Schultz doesn't necessarily have a ton of matches, but he just qualified for the Olympics. So, give that man a little bit of, credit for going out to Mexico and qualifying in the United States for the Olympic Games in Paris, in the midst of his collegiate wrestling season, which once again, we can also give some flowers to Austin Gomez to be able to do that.
Yeah.
For Mexico as well.
I think one of the interesting things is the rubric. Like, here's what's amazing to me. Like, there's a lot of people in wrestling that are very high level, and then they don't know fundamental things about how certain parts of wrestling works. Like, when they interviewed Ryder Downey, and he didn't know how the second overtime worked. Like, there were, and to pick a different one, not to pick on a college freshman, there were people in the Super Bowl that didn't know how overtime worked. Okay. And that's $1 billion industry. Okay. Like, you would think you'd have one guy on your staff that just knows that stuff. And there's people that don't understand the rubric that are complaining. The rubric does not, it's so just numerical. There's no emotion, but it also doesn't really, like, the only way losses really affect you are head to head. And when we get to 165, we'll get into that. But it's just one of those things, like you and I were texting. I would love to see a seating committee that had people that do the rankings all year. Like I was a big proponent of this when I was doing the rankings. I would almost like to be it's super self-serving, but I would love to be the chair of this just because we gather all the data every week and it's on fantasy grade. Like I don't need to have a vote. Just like, hey, there's a bunch of disparity here. Can everybody give their argument on why? And then let's vote. And then you start putting it through and you kind of have the seed set going into conference week. Obviously, a bunch of stuff happens. That's the other thing, GT, when you do rankings is how much does one weekend outweigh 4 months? Like probably the ultimate one I saw one year was Adam Kuhn was like 20-something and 0 and then went 0-2 at the Big Tens. Like had to get a wild card to get in. And he was the number one guy and had beaten had beaten the Northwestern kid that was four-time All-American from Wyoming Seminary. Had beaten everybody. Obviously, he was undefeated, but had beaten really good guys on the schedule. Mike McMullen. So, anyway. All right, 197. Let's see if GT's heated here. Brooks is the baby. Brooks is the 1. Little is the 9. Buchanan is the 8. Cardenas 5, Elam 12. That's a rematch. No disrespect to the guys that are lower seeded. We just can't mention 33 names. Levi Hopkins 13, Beard 4, Sloan 3, Poznansky 14. Jackson Smith is 11. Louis Dupre is 6. Zach Glazer 7. 24-2 Zach Glazer, and his only losses this year are to Aaron Brooks. Silas Allred is 10, Max Shaw 15, Trent Hidley 2. You can go first here, GT.
This weight class is extremely interesting to me because there's if you kind of look at all of the, I would say, and once again, I'm not a big record guy. Like I want to make sure that for a fact, like I don't necessarily care about what your record is. But if you look at this record, there's not a lot of double-digit loss guys in the bracket. If you like scroll up and scroll down, like you can see like, hey, like 5 losses, 6 losses, I think there's only 2 guys with double-digit losses. So I mean, this field is, I think, very, very, very talented. So I'm not necessarily like, like I said, a big record guy, but I think like, these guys are really tough. I mean, like either they're beating up the same people and they're only losing to like 1 or 2 guys or whatever. And once again, we could get into the analytics and go through all of the different people that are, wrestling or whatever. But like, I think Buchanan was undefeated heading into, I think, the Big 12s.
He lost to Rocky. He had 1 loss earlier in the year.
Yeah, so like some of these losses are just in the postseason so far.
Yeah.
So like you're going into this tournament, you take maybe a couple of losses away from these guys, and we're right there. As far as the takeaways on kind of like how I like this bracket and how it's set up, is I'm really looking forward to a couple of these quarters if they do end up happening.
Yeah.
So I like Glazier and Silas Allred for another time would be that's going to be a really, really cool matchup there. But I think Glazier versus Hidley's having a really, really good season too.
A phenomenally good season that we're not talking about. Yeah.
Because I think that what we do, I think almost as like sports journalists or people that do podcasts or people that like kind of watch it, is that we have very, very similar narratives, and we just follow those narratives pretty much all year. It's like Aaron Brooks is pound for pound one of the best in the country, blah, blah, blah. And he's deservingly so of that storyline.
Yeah.
And then like right behind him is, and who's done some really good things as far as like plugging USA Wrestling. Like, he's going to be wrestling in the next quad. And he's going to be very good at, good at those 86, 92 weight classes.
Yes.
But another guy that I want to give some flowers to is Michael Beard for he was an All-American at Penn State and then basically has moved on to Lehigh and has had a very, very successful career. Only one loss this year. And I think that matchup between him and Cardenas, like to get into the semifinals to see who wrestles Aaron Brooks, I'm looking forward to that one a lot.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I watched Stephen Little beat Jackson Smith at the Mizzou Invite earlier in the year, and then Little must have taken a bad loss because for a long time Jackson Smith was ranked ahead of him. So, the 8-9 matchup is critical because if you can win that match, there's essentially 2 backside rounds you don't have to win. Like, if you win and then if he loses to Brooks, he's in the blood round. I think Jackson Smith's got an interesting path. Like, Louis Dupre's had a really good record. They don't wrestle as many people, and their styles, I think Jackson Smith would be okay there. Tanner Sloan's really good, but Jackson Smith might be better on his feet. So that's an interesting one. And as far as the records, you are correct. There's only 2 guys in the first 31 guys that have double-digit losses, and then the pigtail match has those. But, I mean, you were right on point there. Okay, 84, Keckeisen 1. Feldkamp's the 17 against Dugan. Berge's the 9. Wolf's the 8. Pinto 5. Bullock 12. Iserov 13. Munoz 4. Plot 3. Boca 14. Hawks 11. Truax 6. TJ Stewart 7. Fishback 10. Heller 15. Salazar 2. I will say this, Salazar probably, I don't know if he's the most vulnerable, probably the least amount of respect on his name all year for a guy who's a 2 seed. His only loss this year is to Hawks back at like the SIU sort of invite, like sort of the equivalent of the Missouri invite. And I'm starting at the bottom of the bracket. TJ Stewart's a guy that didn't start out great because he was like a 215 pounder, and those guys got to get their weight managed correctly, and he looked really good. And he wrestled Fishback, I believe, in the ACC final, and that's a potential round 2 matchup. Plot Foca's interesting. Plot's better on his feet, but I think Foca pinned him at Nationals one year. So not a great draw for him. And I mean, but this feels like for all the world, like this is Parker Keckheisen's weight. And I mean, I feel like he made bonus to the finals. So your thoughts?
I think, once again, the brackets are the brackets, and like these are all strategically because every bracket is going to get blown up. So we're just hypothesizing cool matchups. Just want to make sure that once again, it could be really cool to see 8-9 go to the 1. If that doesn't happen, right. I'll have a lot of respect for whoever it is that comes out of there. And it's like, all right, well, I'm a big fan of him now. But I think I'm extremely excited for the Munoz Keckeisen match, if that were to occur, 1 versus 4 there. Just because I think it's a conflict of kind of styles a little bit.
Yes.
But I also think that Boca being the 14 is kind of an absurd. Like he's a dangerous guy in the bracket. Like he could do really well. I don't think he's had necessarily the best year this year, but he's still a dangerous out.
He's a super dangerous out. He moved up a weight and he didn't wrestle well in the EIWAs. And so, yes, I agree with you for sure.
I think there's a couple other guys in here that I think were, like having the ACC final in the second round. I think that's difficult for any coach or any conference to see like, well, hey, these are our 2 best guys and we got to wrestle each other in the second round.
Right.
But, I think, I don't know where else you would put them.
Yeah.
So,
well, this whole thing too, like, I think people understand this, but like whether you're the 8 or the 8 or the 9 sort of argue you don't matter. They meet second round, but like the difference between the 9 and the 10 is the other side of the bracket. Yeah. So, there's just big things here. All right. Well, here's the one weight where I know you agree with everything. So okay. Mackay is the 1. Turley is the 16. Carter Starace is the 9. More later. Adam Kemp 8, Canigliaro 5, PK 12, McCoy 13, Griffith 4, Edmund Rue 3, Gavin Sachs 14, Austin Murphy 11. I will mention this. Peyton Mako is the 22, Rocco Welsh 6, Lenny Wollick 7, Incontura 10, MJ Gaitan 15, K DeVos 2. I saw this post. 5 NCAA titles in the top half of the bracket, 1 All-American finish in the bottom half of the bracket, I believe. I believe that's what the post was. Mako being the All-American as the 22 seed. All right, I will try to take some heat off you, GT, and then go. The real question here is, where do you seed Carter Starace? The problem with the formula, and they changed the formula so that people could not just default out of tournaments, protect their rankings, protect their seed, and just like, well, I wrestled all year, I don't need to wrestle in this tournament. Okay, that's a good idea. Okay, like, I don't think anybody's arguing that that's a good idea. The problem is when somebody's injured and they default out, and then the other side of that coin is, well, okay, how much better are they going to be in 10, 11 days, right? Because they were supposed to wrestle on Saturday, Sunday. They get to, and then they wrestle the following Thursday. So I don't really know where you put Starace where it's fair. I think the argument you make is, well, okay, you want to try to avoid him wrestling the top 4 seeds as early as possible. Okay, I think that's maybe a fair assessment. Would you agree with that so far, GT? If you don't make him 1, would you agree? Top 4, like, let's not hit the top 4 anytime as soon as possible.
Well, I think that's 100% accurate, and I also have this one gets me hot, so like I'll wait for afterwards. But I totally agree. You try to not have him go against the top 4 guys in that situation.
Then I think you make him the 5. I think if there's any way that the rubric justifies making him the 5, then that's what you do. And then I think if the rubric doesn't make him the 5, you make him the 12. Because I thought about this last night. Like, Mark and I have this saying, like, if you're not, don't complain about the problem unless you have a suggested solution. If you agree that you should not wrestle the 1, 2, 3, or 4, the next most logical conversation is this: the first guy you should hit is the 4. The only other argument that's maybe more logical is you should hit the 3, because if you think he's the best guy, you want him on the opposite side of the bracket as the 1. In that case, you need to make him the 6 or the 11. Go ahead and go.
Well, I think why I think I was as hot as I have been about this weight class and what kind of happened is, once again, I think that I was just more of being a fan than when I was texting you about this. Because, Mackay and Carter having that be both of their senior year quarterfinal, like made me like question how this works, right? So like even Shane Griffith, he injury defaulted in the finals.
Yes.
And and basically he just kept his whole, like, I don't think and once again, no, ill will towards Griffith, but he injury defaulted in the finals and he basically had no effect.
He dropped 1 slot. He got put behind Edmund Ruth.
So if, let's say, he's not hurt, he would have much rather had the other side.
Yes. Yes. So he'd way rather be the 3 than the 4.
Right.
Yes.
But I think, I think this is where, you never know how it's all going to play out type thing. But I don't believe, even if like we all knew that Aaron Brooks didn't wrestle at the 190, like, do you think they would put him at 9?
Yeah.
I mean, meaning based off of the rubrics or whatever it would have been, or, Keegan O'Toole, do you think he goes to 9? Like that's where my head was going. I'm like, all right, there has to be something that, like, That doesn't make any sense to me.
There's one problem that is self-inflicted, GT, and that is you need 15 matches for an RPI, and Starachi only has 14. So in the RPI portion of the formula, he lost to every single person in the bracket. And the way the rubric works is they do the formula for you versus everybody else. I mean, obviously all at once. And if somebody turns out 32-0, then they're the 1 seed. If somebody turns out 31-1, they're the 2 seed, etc. Okay.
Right.
So I'm going to Google it, or it's on my document rather, but I think that is 10% of the formula. Okay. So I'm just going to pull this up real quick. Rubric. RPI is 10%. So, I mean, here's where he got hurt. RPI is 10%. He had a 0-point qualifier placement. He got hurt on that. Winning percentage, he got hurt on that because now his winning percentage is 6 out of 7, which is only like 83%. And there's a bunch of people that have like 90% winning percentages, so they're ahead of him there. He wins on coach's rank, and then I don't know how much he wins on quality wins because he only had 12 matches and he missed the Big 12 tournament or Big 10 tournament, excuse me. And then head to head, like you can't count the Mackay match, like, because it was the All-Star meet. Correct. The math, he's probably where he should be on the math. I think the real question is, can they tweak this formula? And then the problem is, sometimes you tweak it and it makes one thing fair and 17 other things unfair.
No, and I think I totally agree. And once again, I like kind of having that formula or whatever it is. And I think probably from the world of Twitter and all of these other things, like you take a look at all of those different, whatever it is, subjectivity criteria to develop the math. And if that's not properly explained to everybody to like, understand exactly how that stuff works, or having a ranking board or having an outside, party come in to basically discuss this, is you're going to have wild stuff like that happen where you have, 2 of the very best guys at that weight class. One of them is going to lose and go to the backside and still has another match to even be an All-American.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know. I just felt also like that weight class, yes, to your point, I'm glad that you brought that up, is the bottom side of that bracket has a lot of up and coming youth talent.
Yeah. That's a good way to say it.
Well, if you look at those names, it's, like think even if you look at like Cade DeVos, like he's been in, multiple national tournaments already, but like, just never been able to, just had, whatever it may be. But, you look at, Edmund Ruth, Rocco Welsh, MJ Gaitan, like newer guys, new names.
Rocco Welsh, unbelievable season. Wasn't even supposed to wrestle this year because of Karchla. He gets hurt. Rocco Welsh takes 3rd in the Big Tens, has wrestled Griffith extremely close. Super dark horsey kind of guy. Feels like he's getting better every week. All right, we got to keep it moving here.
Yep.
160, 165. So GT and I made a wings bet, thank God, because I earned a plate back from my brutal losses in the contest. Okay, so here's the seeds, and I'm not going to do it by bracket. There's 2 undefeated guys, O'Toole and Messenbrink. Everything's a tie. Comes down to the coach's vote. O'Toole's the defending champ. He's 1. Messenbrink wins the Big Tens. He's 2. Not saying that's right. I'm telling you that's how it works. Number 3, Julian Ramirez has 2 losses, 1 to Keegan O'Toole, 1 to Olynyk, but Olynyk's lost too many times to be in the conversation. But he beat David Carr. He becomes 3. David Carr has 2 losses, Ramirez, which is now taken into account, and O'Toole, which is taken into account. And what people need to understand is if GT is the 1 seed and I lose to him, it doesn't hurt me anymore. So Carr becomes the 4. Carr beat Hamidi, so Hamidi is the 5. Hamidi beat Caliendo, he's the 6. Caliendo beat Olynyk, he's the 7. Olynyk beat Peyton Hall, he became the 9, and they just shoehorned Antrell Taylor in there. I just picked the top 7. I probably would have been wrong if we went 8 GT. I probably would have went Peyton Hall, but 8 and 9 are kind of irrelevant in the bracket. So you did not agree with this. I think the main argument here is, number one, people would like to see David Carr not on the same side of the bracket as Keegan O'Toole. And number two, there's a lot of people that don't like the fact that Julian Ramirez wrestled matches the day he was supposed to wrestle David Carr and then sat out that duel. Like, he basically protected the head-to-head win he got at CKLV. And it would flip. It would literally flip. It's funny because they're one line apart on the bracket, but that's the dividing line between the top and bottom half of the bracket. I think more people would rather see Carr in the bottom, and Carr has a much better tournament history than Julian Ramirez does. So, besides the fact that you'll scream, "Hey, Dave, you were right," what else do you want to say about this?
Well, I mean, and once again, I took on that wing bet, I basically took the field against Dave. So he had put out the entire, like, this is how it's going to go. And I'm like, all right, I'll just take the field. Anything other than what you just detailed out, I was like, I'll take the field on whatever weird stuff that could possibly happen. Because I always know that these things go haywire a lot of the time, and you don't think it's going to go exactly how you think it's going to go. So I basically took the field. But yes, Dave was 100% correct. I think what also makes this weight class extremely, I don't know, like, I don't want to say the word depth, but like all of those, conference champions, and there's a lot of high-end talent at this weight class that are, going to have to wrestle very quickly in the tournament. So
this feels like a weight, GT, where there's some weights, like we've said this before, like, okay, of the top 8 ranked guys, seeded guys, how many do you think are going to place? Okay. And sometimes the answer is like 3 or 4. I feel like it's 7 here. Okay. Like, I feel like Olynyk on up are all going to place. And if I had to pick, this would be the one weight where I think this is how they'll place in order. The only caveat, I think, is Caliendo can beat Ramirez. It's like Caliendo got a good draw here. Like, he can make the semis. He already obviously got crushed by Messenbrink, but you lose in the semis, the worse you are 6. Now, might not change anything, but Ramirez probably doesn't take 3rd if that happens. Actually, I probably wouldn't pick this in order because I don't think Ramirez is the 3rd best guy. I think the loser of O'Toole Carr takes 3rd. So I'll say that right now. Okay. So let me correct myself. But I think they all finish in the top 7. And then it's just a crapshoot on who wins and crapshoot, by the way, is not a bad word. That's throwing dice. So just so people understand that.
Right.
So anyway, so this will be, and we'll dig into this more. We're going to go a little bit over today. I hope Gary puts us up, but we're, okay. All right. Levi Haynes is the one. We're at 157. Mahler Teague Travis, high school teammate, father Tolton Catholic on Tolton Catholic, crime and rematch of the duel, 17-16. Willowan's 9. Peyton Robb is 8. That's a rematch if that happens. Ryder Downey is 5. Bryce Andonian feels like a super dangerous 12 to me here. Michael Blockus, who was ranked, I think, 3rd in the country, GT, 2 weeks ago, is now the 13. Ed Scott is the 4. Meyer Shapiro's the 3. Chittum is the 14. I believe at the beginning of the year, Mark picked both these guys to win nationals at different weight classes. Now they're going to wrestle in the round of 16. That's bonkers. Brayton Lee is the 11. Cardenas 6. Peyton Keller, who I know very little about, is the 7. Franek is the 10, but I don't think you hate his draw if you're Iowa. Swenson's the 15. Vinny Zerbin, who was undefeated and the number 2 guy in the country, slid from 2 to 18. And then Ja'Cory Teamer, who sure looks like he's healthy and has a Pac-12 rematch, is the 2. So I think, there's a ton of storylines here, GT. Like Chittum, Shapiro's crazy. Vinny going from 2 to 18 is crazy. Mahler Teague Travis. A lot of the matchups we've talked about so far we're hoping happen or seeded to happen. Mahler Teague Travis is happening. Like, it is about 76. So that's interesting. And then Michael Blockus, like, look, you know this. We don't root against anybody. There's certain people, if you root for them. Like, I've interviewed Bryce Andoni, and he just seems like a really fascinating young man. But if you told me number 12 was wrestling number 13 in that quarter bracket, that Andonian got past Downey and Blockus got past Ed Scott, I would not be shocked. Your thoughts here on 7?
Yeah, I think once again, I think when Mark was, we were doing picks and stuff like that, there was a lot of like, I think we all kind of knew, like Shapiro was going to be very good, because he was kind of coming up from nowhere, but you just all knew that he was going to be a guy that could make a really big run.
Sure. U20 champ, right? World champ.
Yeah. So I think some of that is, some of that youth and, guys that are coming up through, like, I think I'm glad to see, that basically some of our fruition has come to the top here. But I mean, this weight class to me is really crazy on the bottom side. Because I think if you look at, the Vinny Zerban, basically only, and that's another match that's a Big 12 match right there with him and Swenson.
Yeah.
And then Ja'Cory Teamer, like, I think looks healthy. Like, he's back to being himself and being extremely, extremely good.
Yeah.
I think the Keller Franek match, Franek, was basically number 2 in the nation for a really, really long time this season.
Yes.
He's at a 10 spot or a 10 hole for all that. You got, Braden Lee, who was previously ranked number 1 in the nation last year, at a new school this year.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of different things that on this bottom side, there's just names upon names, and then young talent versus guys that have, been around forever. I mean, Franek's been around forever. Braden Lee been around forever. Ja'Cory Teamer's been around forever. Like, it's.
I think Myers Shapiro is a little bit better than Cody Chittum, but Cody Chittum's really good. He's found a way to lose some matches that he easily could have won, and if he flips that switch, he's a terrifying 14 seed. If you're an Iowa fan, like, there's a couple weights where they didn't get seeded great, but like Iowa at 65 feels like they're in a good spot. Iowa at 74 felt like they're in a good spot. Iowa at 97 felt like they're in a good spot. And if you go, Franek's got to beat Joey Blaze and Peyton Keller, that's reasonable. And then you go, he's got Teamer. Well, that's a style matchup. And if he can wrestle a slow, methodical, non-athletic 1 or 2 scramble match, he can win that match. So, all right, 49. Okay, so some things happened here. Okay, Ridge Lovett's the 1, Griffin 16. Ethan Fernandez kind of came out of nowhere to win the EIWAs. He's the 9. Casey Swiderski, and we could get into that whole Swiderski-Jordan Williams match. There was some definite retreating going on there, but Swiderski gets the 8. Ty Waters is the 5. GT, I have not watched this dude wrestle all year. My goodness, is he good on top. He's super dangerous. Ethan Miller, the 12, shout out Park Hill. 13, Caleb Rachi against Jordan Williams. That's the match we did not see in the duel, and Jordan Williams was injured and defaulted out of the Big 12 finals in the middle of the match, which is, again, I think a different kind of default. Caleb Henson lost to Jackson Arrington. That makes him the 4. That makes Arrington the 3. D'Amelio, you talk about a guy who has multiple double-digit losses and a low seed, but has gotten it done at the tournament. That's your guy, Dylan D'Amelio. Quinn Kinner is the 11. Austin Gomez, first looked at this bracket, my initial thought was he can make the finals from the 6 hole. Tyler Kasich is the 7. Chance Lamer's the 10. Corbin Munson, 15. Kyle Parko, super solid all year, is the 2. Go ahead.
This is going to be interesting. I think that, Austin Gomez at the 6 is a dangerous pick there. I think if we would have switched out Henson and Arrington, I thought, Henson at a 3 seed would have been a really, really good pick to make that all the way down to the semis. I think he's still in a pretty good place as the 4 going that way as well. I absolutely love the intensity of Casey Swiderski. You know, he wants to barnyard scrap.
Yes.
Like he wants all the smoke.
Yes.
You know, he's like, you know, basically egging on the entire crowd, trying to get, you know, in that match against Williams, you know, he's pushing the pace. That's just kind of who he is. And I think that, you know, him being at 49 was a really, really good move for him. And then I think also one guy I saw down at the bottom of the bracket, Jaden Abbas, as a 26. That's, you know, he's pretty talented too.
It's weird, man. Like he was so good a couple years ago and just really hasn't wrestled like that since.
Mm-hmm.
You tend to think maybe he won't, but his ceiling is awfully high. And when you get it done at the tournament, there's a different level of respect. Okay. 41, Mendez 1, Chappell 16, Hardy 9, Lemley 8. That's a Big 10 round of 16 rematch. Anthony Echemendia is the 5. Wyatt Henson, who's wrestled probably more matches than anybody this year, is the 12. Henson, Josh Edmonds, an interesting match because Sammy Henson's a Mizzou alum. Wyatt's been to 3 colleges in 3 years. I can't figure out how he's actually eligible, but they figured it out. Jordan Titus is the 13. Ryan Jack is the 4. Real Woods is the 3. Jesse Vasquez is the 14. Coderhant 11. Lachlan McNeil, one of your best picks from last year, is the 6. Cale Happel is the 7. Tegan Jameson is the 10. Mitch Moore is the 15. I'm going to mention this. Cole Matthews is the 18, and he made the ACC finals. Bo Bartlett is the 2. I'll start at the bottom of the bracket here. I think fascinating matchup. I think Cole Matthews can get past Mitch Moore. And Cole Matthews, Bo Bartlett feels like it's going to be a 1 scramble match. I love watching Bo Bartlett wrestle when he goes, but Cole Matthews can slow you down. He's almost like a Darian Cruz. Happel, Tegan Jameson's a rematch. Lachlan McNeil, I don't know if he's ever wrestled Real Woods, but, you know, he's got confidence at that tournament. You were on him early. He's wrestling for Canada. I thought that would, you know, screw him up having multitasking, but it didn't. If the seeds hold, Echemendia against Ryan Jack is a super interesting style matchup, like super explosive. Let's stay on our feet versus let's grind and wrestle on the mat. And it feels like Mendez has a very clear path to the semifinals. Those are my initial thoughts. What do you think?
I think Woods is in a really, really good spot. I think he's been wrestling really well, or at least getting kind of back to his whole thing. But I think I really like my dude Lachlan McNeil at 6 to make a good run there. And I think I watched Cale Happel at the Big 12s, and he was back to being a lot more offensive. And, you know, really looked really good at the Big 12 championships. You know, I think another guy that I thought wrestled extremely well at Big 12s was Echemendia. And I think he could be a big sleeper that could make a good run because that guy is explosive. And once again, and maybe it's just like because I was at Big 12s that I paid attention to a lot of those guys.
It happens. When you're there more, yes, that does happen.
When I think to everybody's point, like, I mean, you know, I know that Ryan Jack, you know, he's a beast too. And like that weight class in the ACCs had some really, really tough, talented guys. And what I think was that whoever was like 4 of them got, or one of them had to get in that large bid in order to even still qualify.
Well, it was goofy because I think Cole Matthews was the 1 seed, but he didn't have the bet. Like he was the lowest ranked guy of the 4 nationally, but he had the right ACC wins. And then I think he beat McNeil in the semis, and McNeil took 3rd, Crook took 4th, and then Jack beat Matthews in the finals. And so it's a case where McNeil, even though he lost head-to-head to Cole Matthews, is seated 12 spots ahead of him. And that's the thing. Like sometimes we argue about stuff. Like they both wrestled the same amount of matches, basically 26 and 27 matches. One guy's 21-6, one guy's 16-10. It's like if I reach back and pin you, and then 10 matches later you're 9-1 and I'm 5-5, you should be ahead of me. That's just how it works. So the ACC was super strong at 141. All right, 133. This was the other one. I don't know if it's wrong, GT, but man, did it surprise me. And man, do I love Dayton Fix's draw. Fix is the 1 seed here. A lot of people thought it would be Crookham. Bouzakis is the 16, dangerous 16. But I mean, Fix is, by the way, Fix is 26 years old, literally. So if he's wrestling some freshmen, there's a substantial difference there. Serrano's the 9, Evan Frost is the 8. So you have 3 Big 12 guys in the first quarter bracket. Ragusin is the 5. Latona is the 12. Latona's been really inconsistent this year, but that's not a great draw if you're Ragusin. And he has Kolioko, who has been ranked really high this year and just had a terrible EIWAs in round 1. Phipps is the 13. Dylan Shaver is the 4. I mean, the more I look at Ragusin's draw, my goodness, he has to go to Kolioko, Latona, and Shaver if he wants to make the semis. Iorini, really good this year. He has 2 losses. I know one of them's Fix. I can't think of the other one off the top of my head. I don't know if you know it. He's the 3. Van D's the 14. Romney's the 11. Vito is the 6. I'm going to let you talk about that. Nasser Bailey is the 7. Nagao is the 10. Teskey is the 15. Crookham is the 2. I will not hang up and listen, but go, GT.
So many things to unpack on this.
Yeah.
I think probably the things that stick out to me probably the most out of all of this, Vito being the 6.
Yes.
With basically just 2 losses to Crookham. What a year for Ryan Crookham. Give him his flowers. Great season so far. In a really good position to continue that run. The problem, I really like Nasir Bailey and I really like Aaron Nagao at 7 and 10.
But they hit each other. Yeah, right.
I know that's the thing that really just like those are guys that I am very high on. I think that they're both very, very, very good.
Yeah.
I mean, Nagao getting basically, 3rd of the Big Tens. He's the 10 seed. I think if I was going to pick anything other than, let's say, the wildness of how many challenges can you do in one match, Teskey versus Van D. I think every single challenge that was either played for Iowa and or Nebraska, I bet that match was 38 minutes long.
Yes.
But I like having, kind of that, Jacob, like they're 14 and 15 in this bracket. And I think that is a testament to the depth of 33. And got to give a huge shout out to my boy, Evan Frost, getting the 8 in this bracket. Very well done, sir. Keep going. Looking forward to seeing what he can do.
He feels like the kind of guy that's going to place, dude. Like it doesn't bother him. Like he got the last takedown against Fix. Like, I don't think he beats Fix, but I mean, and he was not the starter at the beginning of the year. They had that transfer kid in who was originally a Nebraska high school kid that went to UVA. I can't think of his name. You probably can. But, he was like a good kid, couple times state champ, but certainly not like, all right, this dude's super elite. And he's the guy now. And I mean, I think he's going to place. I think he's going to play 6, 7, or 8, but I think he's going to place.
Yeah, Zach Redding was the guy last year for Iowa State. And I think that there's some other guys that, like, once again, he just didn't know, and he just quietly went about his job. And I think also another thing to point out is Latona at the 12 hole is a dangerous guy to wrestle at this weight class. And I think, to your point, that little quad between 5, 28, 21, 12, 13, 20, 29, and 4. A lot of good talent in that little itty bitty quad.
Yes. Yeah. All right. 130, 125. All right. Braden Davis is the one. I'm going to probably name more guys here because it's just crazy. Unger.
I think anybody in this bracket can win it.
Yeah. Unger, Peterson are the 17, 16. Pat McKee's the 9. He gets Terrakina round 1. Figs is the 8, which I'd like to talk about that. Volk's the 5. Brandon Kaler's the 21 against Noto, who's the 12. Big 12, Crime 1, certain against Steve O'Poulin. Matt Ramos is the 4. Ayala's the 3. Provo 14. Cooper Flynn 11. Spratley is the 6. That surprises me. Camacho is the 7. Eric Barnett is the 10. Caleb Smith DiAgostino is the 15, 18. And Stanich is the 2. You want to go first here or you want me to?
I'll go first here. I think for as volatile as this weight class has been all year, I feel like this separated out a lot of talent to the point where, like, I feel like they've done a pretty good job of, like, the way that it currently sits and the way that the season played out for all these guys. I thought that the algorithm did a really good job separating out everybody. As far as people that I'm like pretty high on where they're located, you know, I really like Cooper Flynn here. He's really talented. And I think, you know, we got a really, really good matchup potentially between Ayala and Spratley, if that were to happen too, or Ayala Cooper Flynn on that 3-6 quad.
Yes.
And then I'm really surprised, but I think, you know, Jacob Camacho, we don't know what version of him we're going to get, but he's in a really good spot as well.
Yes, he is. And I mean, there's some super weird stuff at this weight, especially just from the ACC, right? Like Ventresca was a starter. Cooper Flynn was going to Olympic red shirt. And then North Carolina State, Camacho wasn't starting for a while. And, you know, they were really good at that weight without him. And now those guys are back in. It's bonkers. What do you think about, I'm surprised that Figueroa is the 8. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, he was 20 something like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. That's kind of a head scratcher to me. And I also think that, like, Dean Peterson at 16 is a bit of a head scratcher. But I mean, to your point, you know, Figs at 8 is interesting. I think that's the best word that I can say. And then also Anthony Noto, who was previously ranked number 1 in the nation at this weight class at one point in time, I believe, is the 12 with 2 losses.
Yes. So I think we talked about this at least one time. Their schedule, if he should probably go undefeated if he's as good as he was last year. And then if he is, he's the clear number 1 seed. And then if not, you know, he doesn't have enough. There's no quality wins for him. That's what hurts him.
Yep.
So, I mean, I think we mentioned this, but Braden Davis going from the 6th seed to the Big Ten to the number 1 seed at the NCAAs, that has to be historical, right?
Yeah. I mean, we're gonna have to talk to Klingman or JB or somebody like that in order to get some you know, some frame of reference there.
It's crazy, right?
It's absurd. Yeah,
I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I mean, honestly, like, if you kind of look at, if you say he's not the number 1, then who is? I actually thought Stanich would be the number 1. It can't be Ayala. It can't be Ramos. I actually thought for a second Volk might be the number 1, but he just has too many losses. Like, his win percentage is bad. Like, it's not even 80%. That's where, you know, like, when I say bad, like, I mean, obviously these guys are really good wrestlers, but I mean, compared to, you know, 19-2, 18-2 is 90%. So, you know, Braden Davis a little over 90. So, So
pull up. I was just pulling up some rankings as I was looking at it because it was looking at.
We can go to the rankings. So I can click out of this. Hold on. Stop sharing, share, and then we'll finish up. We won't even talk about team stuff. Here's 25. So Davis went from 9-1. Ramos went from 1-4. Volk went from 13-6. Camacho went from 11-7. Barnett dropped from 3-8. Now, again, these are the rankings. If you're listening, this is what the consensus average rankings were, not the seed. So, Figueroa went from, it says 17-10. He went from 17-8, 17 ranked to 8 seeded. Noto 15-11. Cooper Flynn dropped like crazy. Actually, I thought Cooper Flynn was going to be the 1 seed if he beat Camacho, GT.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, I don't know who deserves it. I'm just saying that's what I thought. So, all right. Well,
all sorts of weirdness there.
We'll just tease this for next week. Here are the team rankings. And then, so this has Penn State at 156, Iowa at 66, NC State at 70, Iowa State at 60, and these are all rounded. And then all in the 50s are Cornell, Oklahoma State, Lehigh, Michigan, Arizona State, Nebraska. Mizzou is on the outside looking in. There's also a quick article, if you look at it on Flow, projected team standings. This is just based on the seeds without bonus. Penn State 136, NC State 83. That's the biggest gap we've seen all year because Nebraska's next at 58, Lehigh 57, Oklahoma State 55, Iowa State 53.5, Arizona State and Cornell 52, Iowa 9th at 49.5, VTech 10 at 46, Michigan 43, Missouri 36. So just kind of bonkers. So anyway. All right.
Very, very tough.
We went over. Hopefully we'll put the whole podcast up. For Mark, for GT, I'm David. Thanks for watching and listening. See you all next week.